Hey, welcome back, everybody. In this lesson, my goal is to show you how to deploy Exchange Server 2016. Now, part of the deployment process is preparing the Active Directory, because Exchange Server has a dependency on the Active Directory. Exchange can't work without it. And in order for Exchange to do what it needs to do, you have to prepare the Active Directory for the Exchange Server installation. Now, in smaller shops, where you're an administrator of both Exchange and Windows and Active Directory and pretty much everything else, then you don't have to worry about this because when you go to install Exchange Server, Exchange Setup will automatically prepare the Active Directory for you. You don't have to lift a finger. But having said that, in larger environments, it's very common for there to be siloed responsibilities. In other words, you might have one administrator who's responsible for Exchange Server and another administrator who's responsible for the Active Directory. So in those types of environments, you need to give the Active Directory administrator the tools that they need to prepare the Active Directory so that the Exchange administrator can go behind them and install Exchange. So in this video, I want to show you how to prepare the Active Directory for Exchange Server 2016. Now, if you're an Exchange administrator and you also have rights to the Active Directory, it won't hurt anything to prepare the Active Directory ahead of time. When you run Exchange Setup later on, when you get ready to deploy Exchange, Exchange will simply look and see if the Active Directory has been prepared, and if it has, then it'll just move on to the next step. So I want to show you how to go ahead and do this. Like I said, you'll want to have the Active Directory prepared ahead of time if you have siloed administrative responsibilities and there are different departments who are responsible for doing different things. Or perhaps maybe you want to get a jump on things so that the actual Exchange Server deployment process doesn't take quite so long when you get ready to do it. At any rate, whatever the reason that you want to prepare the Active Directory ahead of time, there are 3 steps in doing so. The first step is to extend the schema. So I've got the command that we're going to use right here, setup.exe, and this is Exchange 2016 setup, by the way. So you're going to run setup.exe, and you're going to use the /prepare schema switch and the /I accept Exchange Server license terms switch. So then once the schema has been prepared, then the next step is going to be to run setup once again, and this time you're going to run it with the /prepare AD switch and the /organization name switch, and you're going to follow the organization name with the name of your Exchange Server organization, which at this point we don't have an Exchange Server organization name, so you'll want to put that in there. And keep in mind, you're not going to be able to change the organization name once it's set, so think long and hard about what organization name you want to use. And then, of course, you'll have to use the /I accept Exchange Server license terms switch. And then the last step is to prepare your domain. Now, there are 2 different ways of doing this. The first one that you see right here is the prepare all domains. You can do this as a shortcut if you have multiple domains that you want to prepare, but you can also use this in single domain environments, and I recommend doing that because it'll save you a little bit of typing. And the command is setup.exe /prepare all domains /I accept Exchange Server license terms. Now, if you're in a situation where you want to prepare some domains but not others, then you'll have to be really specific about which domains you want to prepare. And the way that you would do that is by running setup.exe /prepare domain, and then you're going to enter the fully qualified domain name for the domain that you want to prepare, and then you'll specify the /I accept Exchange Server license terms switch. Now, when I get ready to prepare my Active Directory environment in a few minutes, I'm going to use the prepare all domain switch. I've only got a single Active Directory domain, but as I said a moment ago, using this command just saves a little bit of typing, so that's what I'm going to use. So with that said, let me switch over to a server and we'll work on preparing our Active Directory environment. Okay, so here I am on a Windows server, and in this case, the server is my domain controller, and I'm logged in as a domain administrator. Now, what I'm about to show you is how to prepare the Active Directory, and you don't have to do this from a domain controller. I simply went with the domain controller because given the limited scope of my lab environment, the domain controller made the most sense, but you can actually do this from any member server. Whatever server you choose to use, there are 3 things that have to be in place before you'll be able to prepare the Active Directory. The first thing is that the server that you use has to be a domain member. So if I right-click and I go up to System, you can see that this server is joined to the Active Directory domain. It's part of posydemo.com. The next thing that you're going to need is you'll have to have the Exchange system files. Now, this isn't an Exchange server, but what I have done is I've created a folder called Exchange Files, and I've copied all of the Exchange server installation files to this folder. And you can see setup right here. That's the setup.exe file that we're going to be running when we prepare the Active Directory. So that's just something that I've made locally available on this machine. Now, the third component that you're going to need is the remote administration tools. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to open up Server Manager, and I'm going to go to Manage, and then Add Roles and Features. And that's going to bring up the Add Roles and Features wizard. I'm going to click Next. On the installation type screen, I'm going to go with the defaults, role-based or feature-based installation, and click Next. Server selection, I'm going to choose this server and click Next. Now, I don't have to worry about any server roles. The server is a domain controller, so it's already got the Active Directory domain services installed. That's fine. As I mentioned before, you don't have to do this on a domain controller. I'll click Next. Now we get to the features screen. This is where the component that you're going to need is located at. If I scroll down, you'll notice that we have something called Remote Server Administration Tools. And right now, 4 out of the 40 tools are installed on this machine. If I expand this and scroll down just a little bit, you can see that we've got Feature Administration Tools and Role Administration Tools. If I expand Role Administration Tools, you can see that we have ADDS, that's Active Directory Directory Services, and ADLDS, Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services tools. This is what has to be installed. Now, this machine is a domain controller, so these tools are installed automatically. But if you were to do this from a machine that's not a domain controller, then you would need to install these tools so that Exchange Server Setup is able to use those tools while it prepares the Active Directory. So since I've already got everything I need, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of here. And the next thing that I'm going to do is open up an administrative command prompt window. So I'm going to right-click on the Start button, and I'm going to go to Command Prompt Admin, and that's going to open up an elevated command prompt. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to type cd / and press enter. That's going to take me down to the root directory. And as you'll recall, I created a folder called Exchange Files, which you can see right here. I just entered dir, that's the directory command, and that showed me what was on this disk. So I need to go into the Exchange Files folder because that's where setup.exe is. So I'm just going to say cd Exchange Files and press enter. And now I type setup.exe/prepare schema and then space / I accept Exchange Server license terms. And I'll press enter. And that's going to begin the schema preparation process. You can see that Exchange Server 2016 unattended setup has launched. And now there's a file copy process that has to occur. Incidentally, this process takes longer than what you're seeing. I'm just kind of speeding things up a little bit so that you don't have to sit through all of the waiting. And now that the file copy process is completed, we see a message saying setup will now collect additional information needed for installation. This takes just a minute to complete. And now we get into the prerequisite check. And there's a prerequisite analysis that follows. The analysis is completed, and now we're configuring Exchange Server. And you can see that we have a message extending Active Directory schema. We're at 3%. This takes just a minute, so I'm going to pause the video for 1 moment while this finishes. And after just a few minutes, it appears that the Active Directory schema extension has completed successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen, and we'll move forward with preparing the Active Directory forest. So to prepare the Active Directory forest, I'm going to type setup.exe and then /preparead and then /organization name, and then the name of my Exchange Server organization. I'm going to call this Posey. As I said before, be careful about the organization name because you can't change this later on. And then / I accept Exchange Server license terms, and I'll press enter. And you can see that Exchange Server 2016 unattended setup has started. And incidentally, I've never known of a problem to occur with preparing the Active Directory for Exchange, but it's never a bad idea to back up your Active Directory before you start this process, just in case anything were to go wrong. So you can see that the files are copying, and the file copy process has completed. Setup is now collecting additional information needed for installation. And once again, there's a prerequisite check that has to occur. This one tends to be quite a bit faster than the prerequisite check that went on prior to the schema extension. And now we can see that Exchange Server is being configured. And in case you're wondering about how long this actually takes, it kind of depends on the hardware that you're running. Faster hardware is obviously going to be able to prepare the Active Directory more quickly than slower hardware could. In my environment, I'm using lab grade hardware, so it's definitely not the best. And typically, what I've found is that each step in the preparation process, that is the schema extension, preparing the forest, and preparing the domains, takes less than 10 minutes to complete, probably closer to 5 minutes, but I've never actually timed it. Okay, so the organization preparation completed successfully, and we have a message: the Exchange server setup operation completed successfully. So now the forest is prepared. I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen just to kind of reduce a bit of the clutter. And now the last step is to prepare the Active Directory domain. So to prepare my domain, I'm going to type setup.exe / prepare all domains, and then / I accept Exchange server license terms, and press enter. And once again, Exchange Server 2016 unattended setup launches. And it looks like I made a typo. Just left the S off of domain, no big deal. We can fix that easily enough. And I'll press enter, unattended setup launches. And now the file copy process begins. And the file copy is complete. And now we see a message saying that setup will now collect additional information needed for installation. You've seen this message before, and it takes a little while. And now our prerequisite check begins. And now the domain is being prepared. And this process went a little bit more quickly than preparing the forest or extending the schema, and we can see a message saying the Exchange server setup operation completed successfully. So just like that, our Active Directory has been prepared. So that's going to do it for this video, and in the next video, I'll show you how to install Exchange Server 2016.